Samburu West.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity. Land is very important to some of us, that it is very emotive when we think of historical issues about land in our areas and in our country in general. Mr. Speaker, but having said that, if you take into consideration the provisions of Article 63 of the Constitution of Kenya and this Community Land Bill, if you take them in combination, we have done ourselves as a country a very big thing. We've moved not only a very big step forward in terms of making that community land is secure, managed well, and administered, but in my opinion, the combination of this bill and the Article 63 of the Constitution is a giant leap forward for community land in this country. Mr. Speaker, if you were to take a step back and consider the theoretical existence of this bill and the provisions of this Constitution in 1963 and in 1911, we would be in a better place and would be proud of ourselves as a country on what community land would be today. Mr. Speaker, if somebody was talking about the Maasai people here, and it is even very difficult to put into perspective today on how much land the people who speak the Ma language, including the Samburu people, have lost in this country. The first stroke was in 1911 when Lenana signed a treaty with the white people of that time. Mr. Speaker, all Maasai land of Laikipia and parts of Samburu and parts of Rift Valley, many parts of Rift Valley, was taken through a stroke of the pen. In fact, the place where the treaty was signed in 1911, today, that was by the name, that goes by the name Angatapus, a very historical place in Kenya, is today nothing else but a small garden of cabbages owned by an individual. We've lost so much that we can only forget, probably, so that we can move forward. Even Nairobi, where people today own lands that are very valuable, there is very little owned by the Maasai people. You could imagine, I can only imagine that if you had the provisions of this Constitution and this bill, that the Maasai could actually be the richest people in Africa by owning these prime lands in the best suburbs, living suburbs of Nairobi. So this is a very welcome bill. And the Constitution is a very welcome, wherever you can, whatever you want to say about this bill and the Constitution, we can only improve on it. And we have that opportunity as members of Parliament, as members from those communities. The realization of group ranches by the Constitution as registered land that belongs to the community, as I said, is a giant leap forward in our Constitution. Trust lands, no matter what you say, the fact that trust lands are now held in trust by county government, and I hope the governors and everybody else understands that these lands are only held in trust. So Article 63 of the Constitution gives us some life because these governors belong to those communities. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the bill itself, I want to talk on the aspect of converting community land into public land and private land and vice versa. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people who brought up this bill, because these provisions of having 50% of members or more agreeing of a group ranch to convert land either way and 2/3 present, I think it is a very good thing that will provide a very strong wall against those grabbers who want to take community land. Mr. Speaker, but if you look at taking community land into public land, there is one thing that really worries me, this compulsory acquisition aspect. I understand that the world over, all governments around the world, enjoy the doctrine of eminent domain. Eminent domain is available in every country, because with eminent domain, we can serve public good that is owned privately or communally by other people. But we have to be definitive and define what extent does the government take this eminent domain doctrine into. Because if the government can wake up one day and says that there's geothermal in some parts of Samburu, and there is some oil in parts of Turkana, and through the eminent domain doctrine, there are no clear guidelines on how the government takes this land, we agree that they can take it, because that happens the world over. But I think this law, and we'll bring amendments, should provide clear guidelines on how the eminent domain doctrine should be applied in this country. Mr. Speaker, a good example where I come from, the people I represent of Samburu West, is in a place called Mramur. In the early 1980s, when General Kaiseri, the current cabinet minister today, landed in Mramur, the people of Mramur and Samburu County in general thought that the Kenya Army was only there to practice range so that they can benefit our people in terms of defense of our country. But someone up here in Nairobi, in the Ministry of Defense, thought that this was vacant land, never consulted anybody in the community, and went ahead, and today the Kenya Defense Forces, in their minds, think they own Mramur. Mr. Speaker, and we want to say as people from Samburu that will never happen. Because even if you are to consider that this land does not belong to the people of Samburu, adverse possession alone would guarantee that those people have possession of that land. Because they have lived there from the time Kaiseri came in, and even today when he's a cabinet secretary. Those kinds of things are the things that this bill makes us, some of us proud and happy that we can bring these things in the House and pass them. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of converting community land into private land, it is clear that the communities are the ones that will do this through the provisions of the percentages of those members present, and that is clear, and that is good. What I don't understand this bill, and I'm still to understand, is this ratification by the Assembly. We need to be clear on what this Assembly is. Is it the County Assembly? Is it the National Assembly of Kenya? Or is it some local assembly of some criminal people sitting around to take away community land? If I were to make a point here, I would have a preference of having that assembly being the National Assembly of Kenya. But I think those are the few amendments that we'll bring. Mr. Speaker, the other thing that this bill provides is the usage of community land in a very clear way. For those of us who live in community lands, the issue of having communities control grazing is a very important aspect in making sure that our people develop and are empowered economically. If you consider lands today in some of our places, they are overgrazed because people think this is a common, it is a common asset for all, and everybody tries to keep as many livestock as possible. And with that aspect, we end up having droughts killing our livestock and everybody in the community losing. It is a clear example of the old historical tragedy of the commons theory. That people think when something is for the common good, for the whole community, everybody tries to keep as many livestock as possible. This bill helps us now have communities manage grazing in those areas. In fact, even managing the number of livestock that they can keep, and avoid this tragedy of the commons that has taken our communities back in so many ways. Mr. Speaker, finally, some of us are very fearful of anything that is done by the cabinet secretary. And if you look at the regulations that are supposed to be developed by the cabinet secretary, I have a clear understanding that the constitution is superior to this bill, and this bill is superior to the regulations that are brought up by the cabinet secretary. But with the fear and with the past history that we've had with cabinet secretaries since independence, we still fear that some of these regulatory aspects should have come through this bill. Things like boundary issues. I don't trust any cabinet secretary. Not because I have anything against someone, but we know that our past cabinet secretaries have taken a selfish interest in terms of land. If you go to Samburu today, in a place where nobody speaks Kalenjin, zero, there is a huge land, 10,000 acres, owned by somebody called Osei Kiplagat. In fact, Osei Kiplagat does not even know that place. But he owns 10,000 acres of land. Prime land, where we grow barley. The only place in Samburu where you can have the best and the best of barley that we used to brew this beer called Pilsner. It comes from my place. Osei Kiplagat seems to know Pilsner is good and he's taken 10,000 of our acres. He must return. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Fortunately, since the year